Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well and welcome back to another studio vlog. I am very excited for this week because I have lots of really cool projects planned. It's going to be a very thematic week. Lately I've just been in the mood to work on more three-dimensional types of artwork and not necessarily like two-dimensional watercolor paintings and stuff. And so I was like going through my little like to-do list of projects that I want to work on at some point, and I decided that I was in the mood to work on a bunch of Studio Ghibli models and just different things that I want to paint and build and stuff, and so that's going to be the plan for this week. And I'm so excited. Studio Ghibli is like my favorite thing ever. I'm excited to, you know, work on the different projects but also have the finished result to display in my collection. So I have been printing, honestly, way more than I'm going to be able to finish in this video, but I do have some specific things that I want to finish this week for this video, and then anything else will become future videos somewhere because they're just more involved projects that really should have their own video dedicated to them, but I will show you those as well. So here are a couple of the printed Ghibli models that I want to be working on. The first one is this, which this is the robot from Castle in the Sky, so the Laputa robot, and this is actually meant to be a planter if you want it to be, which I might use it for, but this just seemed like a really cool print to have around. It was a really nice textured print. You can probably see it there, like even, well, first of all, excuse the change in filament, I was just using up different like end bits of spools and things, and it did mostly print in this like weird fleshy tone that it's a bit of an odd color, but it prints really nicely. Like you can see just all of that stone texture. But then I just flipped it to a black because that's another roll that I was finishing up, so that's why it looks a bit strange, other than I also haven't taken any of the support material off of it yet. Yeah, this just seemed like a super fun and possibly quick little project to work on. It's not going to need a ton of cleanup as it is that more rough texture, and I thought I could just have a lot of fun with texturing it up, making it look, you know, old and found. So that is the first little thing, and then the next thing that's at least on my desk, because there are a lot of other models that I have around my studio right now, but it is this Totoro Trio. So I had this concept of making, I have like a reasonable Ghibli figure collection, and there are a few of them that have wooden bases, and I thought it might be cool to create some sort of scene on a wood plaque that I had lying around. So I found this, it's not really an oval, it's kind of this weird rectangular shaped plaque in my collection, and I probably am not going to use it to draw on or whatever, and so I scaled these little Totoros down to fit on that well. They're all playing their ocarinas, and these are resin printed and they look absolutely incredible. This big Totoro, it got cut off a little, which it shouldn't have, but not a big deal. I'm gonna re-sculpt that out. But yeah, these just look super clean, and because they're resin, of course, they have all of that crazy detail, and I'm not gonna need to do a whole lot to them before I can start just painting them. I'm also gonna dye this wood plaque, which I'll probably do first soon-ish, because I'll probably need to do a couple of coats of that. And then over here in the actual resin print area, we got a bunch of fun stuff. Turn the light on so you can see things here. This I'm probably not going to get to today. This is the actual, you know, Laputa Castle in the Sky that I'm obviously going to add like a tree to the top, but there's a lot of modifications that I want to do to this, and I need to sculpt tree roots and stuff, and so that just seems like a little more involved of a project than I maybe want to get into for this video. This could quite easily probably be its own video somewhere, so I do probably plan on filming this at some point. It's just not necessarily going to be part of this video, but that is what that looks like. Again, resin printed. Up here you have Porco Rosso's plane that I just needed somewhere to put them to dry. It's in pieces, they're kind of scattered all over. That's of course the main like body of the plane, and the wings here that of course are going to get assembled to the rest of it. Pontoons are somewhere, but I know down here I had to reprint Porco, which he's not cleaned up yet, so I can't really touch him and turn him around. But yeah, he sits in the plane, and you can see just how small he is compared to my finger. The camera won't even focus, that's how small he is. Again, that's something I'm probably not going to get to today because it's more involved, and because I had to reprint him, I just decided to throw some other things on the bed. So I printed Gigi and the lady cat whose name I can't remember, which is great, and they're also not clean, which is why they're all shiny. And then on the resin printer up here still, I'm gonna put a glove on so I can show you that, because that is something we're going to work on in this video. Resin printing is great, but there are a lot of safety measures that you want to take into consideration, like handling and stuff. You know, don't touch it without gloves on, all that fun stuff. But as you can see here, I actually created this little model. It is the Spirited Away statue, like at the front of the train station at the very beginning of the movie that they almost hit with their vehicle. It's a very important, iconic thing, and Spirited Away is my all-time favorite movie, so anything that I can make Spirited Away, I'm absolutely quite happy and willing to. And so I found the 3D model for the statue, slightly edited the proportions to be a little more accurate, and then attached it to this little cobblestone base, because in the movie it's kind of like on this rocky road, and so that's just kind of a whole built-in statue situation right there, all printed. But of course this is like really fresh off of the printer, so I'm gonna need to get that off of the build plate and clean that. Yeah, that's probably what I'm going to do first, so that that's all cleaned up, and then I can go ahead and cure anything that isn't cured so that we can actually start building some of these things. I decided to start with the sculpting stuff because I figured it would probably have the longest dry time, even though for this I was using Epoxy Sculpt, which is a two-part clay system that, of course, once you mix the two parts together, activates and then hardens actually fairly fast. I did have green stuff, which is what you typically use for like more miniature models and things, but I figured I had enough like different little projects, like especially sculpting the Totoro fur and then just filling in the drainage holes and stuff, that I didn't mind mixing up some Epoxy Sculpt. Green stuff is essentially the same thing, it just tends to be in smaller quantities, and I feel like it's a little more malleable right off of like its base level. Epoxy Sculpt can take quite a while to like get it mixed together, but it works amazingly, and so I just use that for all of the different little bits that needed any holes filled. The Totoros were all hollow, so they had to have drainage holes to let the excess resin flow out of them, so got all of those filled up with the Epoxy Sculpt as well. Since it just sands so nicely, I figured that was going to be the easiest. After that, I moved on to dyeing the wood plaque because, again, dry time. Although this tends to be a very fast process, like an hour in between coats if you're doing multiple ones and stuff. I did end up doing like 1.5 coats. It looked pretty good after one, but I did do a bit of a second one just to make sure the color was all nice and even. As for the color, it pretty much was like the one wood stain I had laying around, but it was like this pretty, you know, typical medium brown, so figured that was gonna look good enough. And then once that had all dried, I added a satin coat to the top just to seal all of it, make it look a little more professional and finished, and to also make it look more like it belongs with the other Ghibli statues that I have that have wood plaques. They kind of have a bit of a sheen to the wood. Something just came in the mail and it really fits the theme of this week, so I figured I would do a bit of an unboxing of it. And it is this Baron music box from Whisper of the Heart, although Baron as the character also appears in A Cat Returns. But I'm so excited for this. I ended up buying this and looking it up again because I have files for Baron and Louise as the statues as they appear in the movie, and I was thinking about printing them, but I just decided to like Google the actual music boxes because I knew that they made them, and for some reason I thought they were a lot older and harder to get than they actually were, and Baron was really easy to get, so I decided to order him. I did have a Louise ordered as well. I couldn't get them at the same place, but the store that I ordered her from couldn't find her in their stock, so I'm still trying to hunt down a Louise so that I can have the both of them as a set. But let's bust into this thing because I'm so excited. Buying new Ghibli figures is not something that I get to do very frequently because there just aren't that many, and so anytime I get a new addition to my Ghibli collection, it's always an exciting day. I have a little tie here to pull it out. There's a piece of paper, just, you know, usual legal stuff, so I guess we will. Is this the right way? Yes, it is. Slip the ribbon off somewhere. There we go. Ta-da! This is so cool. It's definitely one of the larger Ghibli pieces I've been able to get. He looks like he made it here in one piece. Everything looks good. The whiskers maybe are a bit misshapen, but nothing. They're probably wire. I'm sure I can get those whiskers going the right way again. He looks really, really nice, and the stained glass in the bottom is really beautiful. And as I believe mentioned, he is a music box. Very happy with him, and now I can go find a spot for him in my little Ghibli display. So here's the current Ghibli setup. Let me get these glass doors open so that you can actually see these things better. So I do plan on reorganizing pretty much the whole collection. I want to make it this whole display. There's just some random things up there for now. So Bear and I sort of just shoved into the one open area that I could, so he's just chilling there. But I figured, you know, might as well show you what I've got going on here. So there is like the one figure that I have that has a wood plaque, although I know there's quite a few other ones that do have them as well. They're just really hard and expensive to get. So that is the only one that I have currently. I'd love to have all of them. These Princess Mononoke figures are a couple of my all-time favorite ones. We have the Spirited Away spirits, which are also some of my favorite figures. They're just so cool and detailed, and they were actually like the newest acquisition in this collection until Baron. We have the set of these movie figures, so there's like each one for all of the Miyazaki movies, and then Arrietty was coming out when the figures came out, so that was another one added. And then down here you have the Kaminica area. So they are these figure sets that I have all but two of. I'm missing the Kiki's Delivery Service one and the Nausicaa one, but these I definitely want to reorganize because I'm actually building some figures to go with them, especially in the Spirited Away department, of course. I was making a bow, dragon Haku, the three heads, and I think that's it to go with them. Oh, and a no-face, because somehow they didn't put a no-face in those sets. Right now they're separated in these like scene sets. It's literally just the cardboard from the packaging, which it has been displayed like this for probably almost 10 years now, and it just could be, I feel like, displayed more efficiently, especially because I have like a lot of things that I want to build and add to this. So there's going to be a lot of stuff changed there. Yeah, that is the current setup, which is pretty much immediately going to get reorganized once I have the new statues and stuff that I'm working on built. So there's your little sidetrack for this studio vlog, but I guess let's get back to actually working on those statues. The only prep work that I tend to do with resin prints, other than, depending on what the model is, a bit of a sanding. For these guys, it was pretty much only their ocarinas because it was a bit more of a smooth texture. You really couldn't see any of the minute layer lines on the rest of them because of the fur pattern and stuff. But other than that, I just take some airbrush primer. In this case, gray tends to be what I gravitate towards, and get everything primed. Super easy, you know, non-hassle step. Just got all of those out of the way while I had my airbrush out to get them all primed and ready to be painted. Now, I was working on pretty much all of the models simultaneously, but I'm going to group the footage all together just so it's a little more cohesive and not so back and forth. I'm pretty sure I did end up doing this step first though, because I really wanted to try out this texture paste to add more texture to the base and kind of fill in those cobblestone crevices. Like the spaces between the stones on the base were just a little wide for my liking, and so I wanted to fill them in with some texture and just generally add a bit of texture, and this turned out really great. I ended up buying a couple of different texture pastes, and I like the other one better than this one that I used, but because it was supposed to look more like gravel and stones, it worked out fine. And I did end up brushing on some of that gray primer again over the texture paste just so that the model was all the same color. But other than that, I just did a bit of dry brushing to give the statue a bit of dimension. It is incredibly moss covered, but I did want the underneath to resemble what the statue probably would end up looking like weathering wise. But once that was all done, it was on to the super fun part, the moss. I ended up mixing up myself this like moss paste, so I grabbed a combination of different moss flakes. I honestly don't even know what you would call these. It just was like different greenery that I had in like my modeling kit that I bought at some point, honestly probably to do Ghibli stuff because it's very Ghibli moss looking. And so I mixed up the various types of grass and other basing texturing things with some white glue and water to create this moss paste, and it ended up working perfectly. The only slight thing that I feel like is the actual moss flakes, we're gonna call them. Most of them ended up being maybe a little large for the scale of this model, so I did end up mixing up more of the like finely milled things, but that moss had like the perfect look, so I concentrated that mostly along the bottom of the statue, and then I ended up mixing up the other kind of texture paste, which I loved a lot more, with some green paint to do more fine moss detailing, and that looked absolutely amazing. I honestly probably could have gotten away with using almost all of that across the whole model. I do really end up liking how the moss, like actual moss, looked like, but the other stuff looked great too, and it was also really easy to paint, and so I did sort of go over the entire model, moss and texture paste and everything with different greens just to give it that more Ghibli look. I was really trying to replicate this statue to what it looked like in the movie, down to these small leaves that had fallen in the mouth of the statue and along the arms, and for these leaves I ended up cutting up this one singular synthetic leaf into like a tiny little leaf-like pieces to glue on this statue. It was incredibly tedious, but it really just finished this model and gave it such a cool final effect. As for the Totoros, at some point it occurred to me that I had literally pretty much never, or at least in a very long time, painted any sort of three-dimensional statue thing, especially with like a texture and like a resin print that had a lot of detail, so I was really just winging it. The one thing I will say, I ended up 3D printing these little paint handles that have a bearing in them, so that means you can squizzle the model around and like rotate it while you paint it, and they are so incredibly useful. It's like one of the best things I've ever 3D printed, which I print a lot, so the tiny Totoro was really the only Totoro that went smoothly. He's a very flat, even color, so, you know, as long as the color was right and it was a nice even coat, cool. The other two, absolute nightmare fuel. I tried to come up with an efficient way to paint the fur. I did not come up with an efficient way to paint the fur. I wanted it to have lots of detail. I know I probably could have just made it a flat color, but I didn't want that. I wanted them to look furry and like you could really see the texture, and so I did a combination of like highlighting the individual fur strands and also darkening the underneath part of the sculpted fur, and it just took absolutely forever. I do think I did get a bit more efficient with things. I realized I didn't have to probably be as particular as I was being with my detail, but I did end up painting fur for like 3 days straight. But I do really like the end result of the texture, especially on this blue Totoro, which probably took me the longest because I was trying to figure out the right blue and the shading and stuff. But after all of the fur painting, not even these tiny, minuscule details were going to trip me up. Other than the fur taking an unexpected amount of time, it was really fun to paint a model for a change, and I do obviously have quite a lengthy list of other ones that I will want to paint in the future. Of course, the final step for these Totoros is to actually attach them to their base. So I just used some E6000, but I did the little prop hack trick that a lot of 3D printers use, where you put super glue on other parts so that it adheres faster, but then you still have the E6000 that will possibly adhere more strongly than the super glue. So did that on all of their little feet, and of course played around with the orientation of where I wanted them all to be and made sure that they actually got placed there. And other than just letting the glue set, this little Totoro statue display is finished. And here are the finished figures. I will definitely insert a better close-up and pictures and stuff of both of these. I really love how both of these ended up turning out, and I can't wait to add them to the rest of the Ghibli collection, which I will probably do right after getting close-ups and stuff of them. But you may be wondering, what on earth happened to the planter that I talked about at the very beginning of this video? Well, it's right here, looking... I mean, it did look worse, but I did like clean it up, primed it, you know, I was fully ready to roll with it, and then I kind of second guessed what I wanted to use like technique-wise to achieve the rusted, weathered effect, and the first thing that I added was this apparently incredibly glossy paint. I swear the stuff was supposed to be matte, but you can see how sheeny it is, which was not a great first step. And so I figured that I was gonna have to like re-put the matte black primer on it, but then I had the texture paste arrive and I tried that out on it, which looked great. I was like, cool, we'll roll with that. But then I ended up adding, you can see the green. The green is like the extra that I mixed up for the Spirited Away moss, like what's on the face and stuff. I had quite a bit mixed up still, so I just decided, you know, because I still wanted to use the texture paste, I kind of didn't care what color it was going to be because I was going to repaint this entire thing anyhow. But the green looks great, and it does have like that mossy look to it. Probably not necessarily in this color, maybe a little more subtle green, like a more olive moss situation. And so the plan is that I'm going to repaint this black, but then I'm going to finish the base off appropriately this time with the right brown paint, but then I'll probably add actually colored texture paste to it to create that mossy effect, and then can add any extra weathering and stuff to that, and that's probably going to be what I do to it. But really, I just ran out of time. That fur took way longer than I was planning on, and so this is just going to have to be a project for another day. I also got slightly sidetracked with something. I don't think you can, hold on, let me tilt that up. You can see it up there. But when I went to go paint the Totoros, I realized that my light situation in that corner, like I have my two studio lights here, which are great because I typically am painting on this desk, but there isn't a secondary light over there, and a lot of the time for model painting you need almost even more intense light than if you were like watercolor painting or whatever, or that's just what I found I preferred. And so I DIY'd this light panel up there. I did a video on it which is not going to be up yet. I'm going to put that on my prop shop channel. I'm going to like edit it probably today and hopefully get it up tomorrow, and so if you're watching this on the day that I post it, that video should be up tomorrow. So I will link the prop shop channel and everything, card it below, all of that fun stuff if you want to learn how to make your own like super intense, like, hold on. You can see it's like this really intense, amazing painting light that if I didn't have like my studio light set up, I would absolutely use that to paint with. I could literally move it over here if I wanted a more intense light on this desk as well, but that's amazing, and it's like so inexpensive to create. So that's just a really exciting new addition to the studio, and it's like totally a temporary setup. I like made it to be attached to tripods and stuff so I can move it around, attach it to things wherever I need to. So I'm a little bummed I didn't get to the planter, but I am happy with the two things that I did finish, and obviously I'm excited to work on all of the other things that I printed that I knew I wasn't going to be able to get to. The printers were all behaving themselves, and I didn't have any other things to print like work-wise or anything, and so I just had them running pretty much 24/7 for me, which is something that doesn't happen very often. So I have a nice little stockpile of projects that I can work on whenever I feel like. But that is going to be where I end this studio vlog, so thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.